hand here. So every single media company on the planet is dialed into AI. And probably the topic most discussed, certainly in the bar when you've got a scotch, and you've been in about 300 of these conversations, right, Chris? Is that it's like, what do I do about this AI thing, right? And the first reaction for every media company was, I'm going to sue these people out of existence. They're stealing my stuff. Copyright has been hidden away. No one seems to care. I'm not having it. That was kind of decision number one. And then people have been kind of changing their views and trying to learn how the technology works and trying to work out whether it can be a good thing or a bad thing. And normally I'm all over this, right? Because it's like, this is exactly my space. I'm paying every attention to every court case. I'm following it all. But right now, the epicenter of this debate has shifted from the rest of the world and has gone like a missile straight into London. Okay, so right now it's London that's leading this conversation, and that means it's happening right on your front lawn, right? So really, I'm going to take a bit of a step back here and have you describe to us and explain to us what's happening with the British government, because what it's doing, I've seen some amazing stuff this week on on socials and everywhere. Like, there's a lot of activity and a lot of energy. So, mate, the floor is all yours. Go for it and enjoy your tea.
You fire in. Right. I'll do kind of a sort of a bit of an explainer about all the stuff that's going on in the UK and just sort of why it seems to bubble up here particularly. We should probably start 1710. I mean, we all know the Statute.
You're looking good. You're looking good though for your age, mate. To be fair.
Yeah. I was there when. So this is actually so copyright law in the UK was first put in place at the middle of a big technological innovation, and that was the printing press. And the reason it was put in was because people who bought a printing press were effectively taking books that had been written by authors. Because they had the press, they were reproducing them, selling them on, no money to the author. So copyright was literally the right to copy, and it had to be granted by the author to the printing press crew, and the author had to be paid for the value of their works. And so that's like 1710, whatever that is, 300 plus years ago, which is why the UK is always so good, because it always goes back somewhere to the Middle Ages. So that's sort of held for 300 years. There's been a little bit sort of in the last maybe 20 years about text and data mining and trying to think about, well, if I scan a work to do something else with it, but I don't appropriate it, I don't copy it, and I don't turn it into something else, is that okay? And there's generally been a sense that, well, that might be okay. So if you think of something like Google's search index, Google kind of runs through and sort of takes temporary copies and things of what it's doing, but it doesn't, it has a purpose, and it's kind of understood that that's not the same thing as taking a book and publishing it and passing yourself off as Charles Dickens, right? So that's sort of the background of it.
Jeff Dickens, he's nowhere near as good, right?
He's nowhere near as powerful. So keep that sort of on your left-hand side. Then AI kind of in the UK. So the UK is generally seen to be the third biggest player in AI, and the UK is not a third biggest player in most things. It's quite unusual, and it's because it has the universities, it has the technology, it has kind of a lot of kind of science talent in the country. And so it's the third biggest player behind the USA and China. This for us is a good Olympics.
I know you mentioned this. You mentioned this in the lead-in. I had no idea. That's a bit of a surprise to me. I'd assume that it would have been, well, I don't know. I have no idea. Russia. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've no idea.
Yeah, and the other thing, so it has things like ARM. It's also, so people forget that DeepMind, which is Google's kind of flagship AI piece, was born in the UK. It's run by a Brit. One of the early kind of sales out of the UK that probably made the UK scratch its head a bit and go, should we be letting these go? There's no way that DeepMind would be allowed to be sold today in the way that it was previously. So UK wants to be an AI superpower. So one of the first things so the Sunak government was pretty hot on it. And so they set up a lot of it. But as soon as Starmer came in, for those of you who don't know Keir Starmer, he's our fantastic new PM. He came in and he was like, I really want to double down on AI. He's got these growth missions, and he has two growth missions that are interesting for today. One is AI, and the other one is the creative industries. On the AI one, they commissioned an entrepreneur called Matt Clifford to say, can you write us a report? We want I would describe it as a balls out. Like, what would you do if you really wanted to go at this? So there's a report called the Clifford Report, which has a fancier name, but that's effectively what it is. and it's an AI action plan for the UK. It has
Okay.
50 recommendations in it. It's quite short. It's 50 recommendations. It is genuinely one of the most ambitious government things I've read in years. It basically says we're going to create power, we're going to create special economic zones, we're going to create university training, we're going to go and create, we're going to make water work for AI companies. The government procurement is going to change to support the kind of development of the AI industry. It is like breathtakingly ambitious, and I applaud it. Yeah.
I applaud it too. Can I ask you a quick question though? And
Sure.
like, this is going to sound snarky, but I'm just going to ask: is it because like England's not part of Europe now, and it kind of needs to be a bigger deal? Is that kind of what it's about? Is this about an oh shit Brexit moment?
Well, I mean, to be honest, Britain needs growth, and so that's why they originally had these growth missions, because they need to pick winners effectively. And so the government has picked this as something where, as you say, if we happen in this one to be number 3 in the world, and also being outside the EU gives us a lot more flexibility to kind of set our own rules around things like safety or things like training or copyright or all the other things that you can do. So there's an opportunity there. So it feels like a smart kind of bet to back. You're still building on success. So very ambitious report, and kind of sets out 50 recommendations. One of which is, by the way, you probably ought to sort out the legal framework that all this rests on. But that's not for this report, right? This is, that's for someone else. But it needs doing, right? So that was how it left it. Government effectively waves through all 50, claps his, podium speech. Keir Starmer says we're going to be an AI superpower. I effectively heartily recommend this report. We're going to do it all. So they then go to the place you've never probably heard, the Intellectual Property Office, who are the people who file patents in the UK, and they say, hey, you guys, why don't you run a consultation about AI and copyright? So they didn't give it to the data protection people. They didn't give it to the competition authorities. They didn't give it to the ICO, who's the Information Commissioner. They gave it to the Intellectual Property Office and said, run this consultation. And so it was set out to say, like, we're going to consult with the industry on, both the AI industries and the creator industries on what copyright needs to be in sort of the modern age. And that was where this consultation began. So the consultation comes out. Now, it's also worth saying that the UK as a creative services sector is a superpower in that area already, right? It is, I think, £155 billion industry, right? It employs 2.2 million people. It's one of the things that we do and that we export better than most countries. So, every kind of, every song, every book, every film that gets created in the UK kind of creates to that, what they call gross value add value of the creative industries.
Yeah, I remember that from when I was there, yeah.
So at the moment, AI is like a tenth of the size of that as an industry. So you're putting together these two kind of big, we said, these are our growth missions, but copyright seems to be the point at which they slightly grate up against each other. So let's have a consultation and let's see what comes out. So the government says, in a very kind of governmental sense, our job is to find the right balance between control for creators who should have their rights respected, access for developers who should be free to do anything they like at the speed that they like to build the superpower that we want, and transparency, which means we can see what both sides are doing. And so there's a long consultation. Effectively comes down to 4 options that the government lays out. In a brilliant touch, option 0 is to do nothing. An option so bad it doesn't even get a number. Right. So that says, we know it's not working, so we can't kind of continue like this. It's the breakup speech. This isn't working. Something needs to change. Kind of.
Option 0. So that's really important, isn't it? Because people will have seen 0 and just gone, no, that's nothing. But that's the status quo, right? And so often, I actually use this phrase today in one of my posts. So often, when a real challenging thing comes up, the government does nothing, and it's not the status quo; it's the stagnant quo. That was the phrase I used today. It's just like, I know it doesn't work, but it's just too hard, and I can't be bothered, and I'm just going to leave it, and I hope someone else will fix it in the future. So this is an admission that the current situation with copyright does not work for the AI era. That's a really important thing to notice.
Yes, and they're very careful in the drafting of it to say, like, not to kind of get into why it doesn't work. They talk a lot about the confusion that AI developers have in this area, which I think a lot of the publishers feel is generous. And
Okay. Let's have a bit of fun. So the thought here is that when I log onto your website and I hit Control Copy, Control Paste, and I steal your stuff, and then change its name and change the font and change the color and put my byline on it and then put it out to sell, I might not realize that I'm actually doing something wrong, is the suggestion.
Well, we want to clear that confusion up, the government says. We want to clear that confusion up.
That feels wise.
So that's option 0. Take that off the table, right? Then there's then there are the classic kind of consultancy 3 options. Option 1 is we're going to enforce copyright, right? We're going to strengthen it. We're going to basically say it needs to be licensed. We're going to come down on the side of creators, and that's option 1. But the government kind of says in that, but Jesus, that would not be great for AI developers. That would create a burden on AI developers.
It's not a nation building project, is it?
No. So think of that as kind of opt-in as the option, because for the minute that option 1 comes into play, everything is copyright protected, and to do anything else, people have to give their permission for their data to be used, right? So that's a change. In theory, that's the system we're in now, but in practice, it isn't. So that's quite a big shift. The second one is, what about the other extreme? We just create an exception for AI, and we say that the text and data mining is completely exempt from copyright. So fill your boots, basically, is option 2. AI developers, the UK is a paradise in which you can take anything you like from anywhere you can find it, and publishers, sorry, but this is better that we just go this way. It's very clear.
Can I just check? Did the AI geniuses understand that one?
I think they quite like that one.
Right, yeah.
It cleared up a lot of confusion, that one. And then the third one was okay. Well, I say that's why it's a classic three-way consultancy. Maybe those 2 are too extreme. What's the one in the middle? The government's recommendation was option 3, a narrow exception, just for certain types of text and data mining to train models, and with the right to reserve your rights for publishers. So this is effectively an opt-out, and it says we kind of want to encourage the AI industry to have access to large-scale data, but we do want to give creators the ability, should they choose to take it up, to reserve their rights and not have their content used. And they recommended option 3, and that was the consultation, right? So we're saying there's lots of choices here. The government suggests that option 3 is the best balance between control, access, and transparency. What do you think? So the general response to it has been the creative industries do not believe option 3, is the right option, because A, it creates an amnesty for everything that's ever happened. B, it creates a situation in which the statute of Anne is effectively kind of 300 years old, wiped off the books, because the starting position for every piece of content created is that it is copyright free until the publisher chooses to reserve the rights.
Right. So can I just ask? Yeah, sorry. Can I just ask on that then? So I'm the Sun, okay, and I happen to know, having run the P&L of some of those companies, as indeed you have, right?
Yeah.
It's not free, right? And so people aren't there doing it for fun, and we're not flying all around the world doing investigations for no money. It costs, right? And so you've got to somehow cover your costs. So you're the Sun. You definitely want to opt out, because if you opt out, it opens a marketplace for you to sell your content to someone for this, right? So you're going to opt out. How do you do that? Has anybody talked about that? Is it a terms and conditions? Is it a snippet of code, or is it just one of those things left in the cloud, one of those horrible grey areas that tech always drive a truck through?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And actually, one of the reasons why there was a strong pushback against this sort of idea is we're going to be in consultation for another 6 months, and in that 6 months, every piece of data that's then taken and ingested into models, we can't opt out at this point. So you've got this kind of free for all for a period of time.
Which means everybody will work 5 times as hard.
Same thing that happened in the EU. So the EU is kind of sometimes held up as saying, well, these guys put an opt-out regime in. But actually what the EU did is said, we think we'd like to, but they haven't yet actually delivered anything actionable. So it doesn't exist at this stage. It's a kind of Schrodinger's, it's neither kind of opt-out nor it doesn't exist. So there's no practical implementation. And one of the things that, one of the big pushbacks, I think, from the publishing industry was, and the music industry and every other creative industry was, we haven't created this problem. The burden of regulation should sit with the government. The burden of compliance should sit with the AI developers. The burden of providing the technology to manage that in a kind of machine readable sense. Someone else is going to build that, right? That can't be sat with us. And it can't be the case that every publisher has to go to every AI company and say, we'd like to opt out, thanks. So none of that's in place.
Right. So no one knows how that's going to be in place or how that's going to be implemented or policed or otherwise. So you have effectively... Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, to be fair, nobody knows that anywhere in the world, which is why, as you say, the UK is like the first ones almost to wade into this swamp.
Yeah.
And go, oh, okay, so you'd have to actually have something, no one really has cracked that. It's slightly similar, if you remember this around GDPR, right?
Yep.
It's slightly similar to that conversation, which is we've got the principle that we want data privacy. Well, God, now there was a long time between establishing the principle and actually having workable kind of opt-in, opt-out kind of things in place that kind of managed it. So we're kind of there at this stage.
Okay, so what I'm seeing in my mind's eye is a bit like my iPhone. So it's like default on or default off. We've got this little switch. Yes, no, yes, no, right? So I would imagine that pretty much the publishing industries, the people that, kind of you and I represent, they're all default no, like by default, I would have thought, right? So they're an automatic, it's a hard no. Because guess what? What we do costs money and we do it for commercial reasons. It's funny, I was trying to explain this to somebody yesterday. I was on a stage at a big event yesterday. It was Chatham House Rules. I can't talk too much about it. But I was on stage and I said, the news industry is not actually that hard, right? What we do is we write information that attracts an audience that we sell, right? And we think about it, we get so lost in all of this detail, but that's really what we do. And so when people say to me, what's the most important asset your business has got? And people say, oh, it's our content. And I'm like, well, that's a third of it. And then they're like, yeah. But then what happens? I go, well, then it's our audience, right? And they go, yeah. And I go, then it's the ability for us to sell it, right? And they go, well, yeah. And I go, well, it's not content is king then, is it? Content is a facilitation towards our business. Ultimately, at the end of the day, cruel to say, but true, our business is about making money, or otherwise we can't make the news tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's an element of that, right? We're all listed companies, right? And so we have to do that. So it's going to have to be default off on my AI phone, right?
Yeah. And just to be, one of the things we're really keen. So I worked a little bit with the PPA on their submission.
PPA. You should explain who the PPA is.
Sorry, sure. So it's the Professional Publishers Association. It's effectively the magazine trade body in the UK. And one of the things we were really careful to make sure we made clear was publishers are not technological Luddites, right? We're all digitized and we're all kind of looking at technology innovations as a way of growing the business. We're not anti-licensing. Many publishers in the PPA and the news marketing associations, the kind of news business, have done deals with AI companies. So we're happy to license content. We've been syndicating content for years. So what we're saying is that the framework that's in place, if its default is you don't have access, that incentivizes people to put in place the right operational technology and incentivize them to do the right deals to get the content that they need. We are all expecting to move to a world where our content is both direct to consumer and direct to robot. We're expecting there to be a licensing world that kind of grows up. But the incentives that you create, if you say effectively opt-out is like, well, catch me if you can. And that creates a completely different set of incentives, and it sets a completely different precedent for the creative industries. Now,
interesting.
One thing, just because the publishers we all think that publishing is like the center of the universe. You've also got to think in this conversation, medical data, engineering data. There's a huge ton of things where this kind of conversation is more about like. So the UK has one of the amazing advantages the UK has. It has the NHS, which means it has a
Mhm.
centralized data store of every patient that gets treated in the UK. One of the great data assets that could be potentially passed to AI developers in the UK is every health outcome of every patient amongst a 60 million population over the last 50 years.
I think the NHS is something that could do with some efficiencies.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the great licensing contracts of all time. So there are areas where this debate is the copyright doesn't really fit into that, because what that's being used for is a completely different set of things. One of the things we tried to draw out in this, and we should jump in and talk a little bit now about why is this, what kind of tools are we talking about, was that we're not just talking about taking information to train models. So we're talking about an AI sort of ecosystem, which is both training models for LLMs, it's building, access for generative search, it's building agent models on top of that sort of ecosystem. And a lot of these companies are also funded or integrated with the existing digital platforms. So, Meta has a Llama, and Google has AI overviews. So there are places where it's impossible to just say AI as if you're just talking about a little bit of kind of research training for models.
Right. Can I talk about that for a minute? Because so many of you, I can see a whole load of you dropping on, and I'm sure Chris knows a ton of you. I know a ton of you as well. Look, most of you will know, but some of the people maybe that watch this on the newsletter won't realize is that just over a decade ago, I created an AI. I founded and created an AI company. Before AI was sexy, before investors knew what I was talking about, before anybody could spell it, I ran an AI company. But the interesting thing was that what often gets lost in this conversation is everybody talks about AI, but AI and generative AI are two entirely different things. So you can use AI to do all manner of things, and once you've created AI agents, it might be translating your content into a different language, or in my particular case, what it did was it read articles, watched videos, and matched them together in real time by contextuality. Right, that's what my AI was for, because News Corp, who was the first customer, published 2,500 stories an hour, across the whole world. And they didn't have enough journalists to go and find or make a video to put it in the page. So what we did, our technology found video around the web that was contextually relevant, validated it. This is from Bloomberg, this is from Reuters, this is from BBC, and then licensed it. Important thing to do, licensed it. And then the AI would say to the reporter as they're writing their story, this video from the BBC from 3 minutes ago is relevant to this article. And then the reporter would go, okay, yes, it is, and put it in the page. And when the reporter put it in the page, and then people watched it, and then people advertised on it, it validated and taught the machine that that was a good connection, so it would make a better recommendation next time. That was AI, because it was learning from, we had human reinforcement going on to teach the AI machine to optimize itself to make a better recommendation next time. That was a learning machine. It was an AI that we started, but that was an AI, right? Gen AI is different. Gen AI is, let's look at every work of Banksy and see if I can make something just like it. Yeah. Now you can imagine why creative people are not enormously infused with that concept, right? Because to your point on William Shakespeare against Jeff Shakespeare, the problem is that as the AI gets better, you won't be able to tell the difference. Yeah. And that's where people really start to get agitated, isn't it? I don't think anybody are really worried about the incredible leaps forward humanity can take in cancer research and discovering new novel materials and all this kind of stuff. I think that's all absolutely marvelous. Let's do that. Let's take a great leap for humanity. But trying to take more of the advertising pie by sucking dry the media industry is not the same thing. And to be honest with you, I don't know about you, but my scar tissue in the media, from the media industry in the last 25 years, is about 4 miles thick. Okay. And I'm just not going to stand for it again.
No. I mean, I think, so we're both, village elders, right? So you remember the kind of, the original sort of deal with Google, where You will.
I
It's
was there.
fantastic, right? Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is basically a source of traffic. It's a pass through system. Yes, we're going to give access to be, to be crawled and create a search index. But the reason we're doing that is because, the original sin, if you like, is because we're going to get this amazing source of traffic. And one of the things that kind of runs through a lot of the
Which, by the
submissions
way, traffic was money because we were in the advertising game. That was the transaction.
And for a long time, it was incredibly powerful. We grew audiences, very lucrative. Now we're in sort of Google. We're in sort of the 20th year or whatever of that business. It's changed a lot. The things that the price of entry to the search index is much higher. That's what monopolies do basically over time. So I think there are a lot of people in this consultation who've lived through that and who look at this kind of stage of AI that we're at and say, well, this is a very nascent industry, right? This is kind of still being bottle fed. It's still finding its place in the world. It's still finding the models. Now, anyone who looks at, if I just take it, so forget this is an AI business. I'm going to lay out, it's going to cost me $10 billion to train a model. I'm going to need 500,000 GPUs to do it. So I have to find 10 billion of capital. The advantage that I get technologically is going to last me probably 2 years. So I have to get my money back in kind of 2 years from a capital perspective, or I have to be able to convince my accountants to write it off over longer. So I have to make back the money that I've invested in building this kind of generation of models. So I only have, media knows, you've only got a couple of ways to do that. You either basically sell direct to businesses and consumers and you charge them a subscription fee, or you sell advertising against the results. And so what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of kind of, certainly in generative search, a lot of AI companies starting to say, well, obviously, probably the model here is going to include advertising. The other thing is those products are consumer-facing products. So they're careful to position, again, in their sort of consultation responses, they'll position LLMs as if it's like a science experiment that happens in a dark room somewhere and, it's away from the public. How many people do you know? I mean, I literally got the train into town yesterday. 3 school kids stood in front of me, about 4 foot tall, and one of them was saying, I was working with ChatGPT last night, to basically do my homework, and so this is a consumer-facing product. If you just position it, it's a cost 10 billion to make. It's a consumer-facing product that is going to have to take advertising or direct revenue from consumers to fund it. That's a competitor, right? It's not.
So,
it's not.
I know. I get it. So look, I think again, having done a startup, when you go first, it always costs a ton of money, right? So I've given quite a lot of presentations on stage about this. I'm going to share a funny anecdote with you. So I don't know if you remember, but when I was still in London, when I was news editor of the News of the World, I had a 1973 VW Westphalia Combi it was my passion. It was called Epiphany, and it was my getaway because I used to go surfing on the weekends, and so I used to park the car in the car park at Wapping, and then drive it down to the surf. And then I used to get a phone call every week from facilities going, somebody's parked some old Charabanc rubbish, old rusty thing in your car parking space. I used to have to tell them it was mine. But you see, the funny thing was, I'd drive my Combi as fast as I could down the road, and it would do about 50 miles an hour top whack down the M4. And there was another Combi that was doing the same thing. And on the other Combi, it said on one side of the Combi, the early bird gets the worm. But on the other side, it said, the second mouse gets the cheese, right? And the point here is a bit like that in these tech things. It's going to cost you 70 billion, maybe, to be the first to have a go. And you think you're going to get the worm. But more commonly than not, it's not you that wins. It's the second mouse that makes all the money, right? And so, this has happened all through our lives, right? MySpace went to Facebook and to Meta. There were plenty of search engines before Google. Yeah, lots of people have a go, and it feels a bit like that right now. There's going to be a shakeout of the existing AI companies. Some are going to win, some are going to lose. And to be honest with you, if I was putting my money on who's going to win this race right now, and having seen these play out so many times, it's going to be really difficult to catch OpenAI right now. I'm not sure that OpenAI doesn't go past Google, past Microsoft, outgrow the parent, and just go boom. I think it might be the next one, but it's going to cost a lot of money up front, and you have to break some eggs, right? And a lot of people in stable businesses don't like broken eggs, right? So where do you think it goes? Because I saw, tell me a little bit about, I got emails everywhere of front pages blazoned with, we're gonna fight back and all this kind of stuff. It was like the media never ever fights collectively. They'd much rather fight with each other, and yet they also suddenly seem to find some sort of kumbaya this week.
It was amazing. So they created, first of all, this is probably the best trade body name I've ever seen, which was, it was the creative response against AI, something. But the acronym was CRAIC, CRAIC, which is, is the Irish kind of, I'm here for crack, basically.
Or this.
So this was the first time I've ever seen probably like the music industry, the news industry, the film industry, the TV industry, the kind of magazine is all together in the same collective. They then started to you get out the big guns, because there are very simple rules in the UK. You do not piss off Paul McCartney and Elton John in the same week, right? You have if Macca comes out and makes it, you have a problem,
right? Okay.
So they had that. The music industry released a silent album, put it on Spotify, got people like Kate Bush to make silent tracks to say this is what you're going to get if you put this through Parliament, and people could buy it, and that money would go to the musicians' kind of artist fund. The news industry, and you know how hard this is to do, wrapped every newspaper in the UK. So if you look at the newsstand in the UK on the day the consultation was due to be submitted, every single one of them had a "Make It Fair" with the A and the I in fair as AI. Make it fair in bright blue to say, look, you cannot run this process with the creative. You're going to kill the creative industries and hand the keys of the country over to AI developers, and we say, write to your MP. It's a fuss, Ricky. It's a fuss.
It is a fuss, right? And I get it, but look, I've got to ask you a really tough question here, right? Do you think the public give a shit, right? And so, it's very difficult to call poor when you're News Corp or Paul McCartney, right? And so, I just wonder whether that kind of look. Obviously, we need to create a fuss and we need to stand our ground. But do you think it's actually landing with the public? So I'm pretty sure that the public's really enjoying OpenAI. Well, and they think OpenAI is AI, right?
Yeah. So I think so, because there's a lot of other research at the moment which is basically saying there's a general sense of big tech has got too big. There's a general sense of we're spending too much time with technology. A general sense of some of the sense that these are US companies, and maybe we don't have to just do whatever we're told to do from the US side. There's so there is something to tap into, which is a lot of people actually, while they might use it, are also quite fearful about AI. They don't know what it's going to do to jobs. They don't know what it's going to do to it's how can it be used against the workforce. So there isn't as much. I don't think there's as much kind of complete, unwavering adoption of it. And the other thing to remember is, it's 2.24 million people employed in the creative industries, and millions more people who are enjoying the output of it. Very few of the people that are really going to be interested in this feel that they're necessarily directly going to benefit from AI in terms of jobs, because it's a really specialist area. Are they going to benefit in terms of what happens in their workforce? Some of them maybe, but a lot of them not. So
how many did you say? 2.5 million?
Yeah, I think it's 2.3 million.
So that's like 1 in every 35 people in Britain, right?
Yeah, creative industry is 5% of the entire country's gross value add.
All right, 1 in 20. So that's that's really meaningful, and that's interesting. Yeah. Do you think that or have you had any sense yet that there's any kind of nationalism and national protectionism going on here? Because America's got quite aggressive this past week. So for people that haven't been following it, the White House sent out a note, and it basically said, I won't give you all the details, but it basically said, if you're a foreign state and you are taxing our big tech companies for using them in your countries, you're extorting us. Okay, because this is American technology that America created. And it's really interesting. I'm a journo, right? So I don't get terribly excited about numbers and getting really deep into that, except for some reason I've really got into it recently. And so I'm really interested. So when you look at what the taxation is of these various companies around the world, Here in Australia, the total, I'm going to get these numbers really close, but not exactly right. So forgive me if I'm a percentage point or two off. But Meta paid something like a 11.7% tax last year globally, and Google paid about 16. All right. Now, I don't know if that's what you paid, but it's certainly not what I paid. And it's not what, if you then go and have a look at all the Fortune 500 companies in America to try and work out if they're getting a special lick, okay, all of those companies combined paid something like 36. And so that was the average. And so 36, 20, 36. And so you've got a situation where these guys are somehow managing to get a better deal anyway, even on their massive numbers, okay? And so if you're a foreign country like the UK or you're Australia or you're Germany, what you want to do is you want to tax those companies some money to keep at least some of their riches in your GDP, because they're earning it in your territory from your people, except it's technology. So it doesn't live on the ground anywhere. It lives in the cloud. So where is the tax jurisdiction? And this thing is a gray area. And oh my God, does the tech industry love a gray area, right? And so it's like, well, no, we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare to you what our profits are in your country. And we're going to tell you, but we're not going to give you any data at all that can be tested or checked. And it's all in our technology. So you just have to believe us. Like, I really want to try that one myself with the Australian Taxation Office, see how it goes. So that's the first thing they want to do. And then the second thing is they say, well, our profits, we have so many people here and all our technology, we're amortizing some of it to you and it's X, Y, and Z. And therefore our profit is really not very much. So we're not going to pay very much in tax, but we'll pay you exactly this. And then they take the money, they take it to Ireland, they wash it, and then they send it back to where they are. Now, what America's said is that they're not happy with that, because now every country in the world has decided it wants to bring in a digital services tax. And this is like a lot more than that, right? So we're actually going to tax you on what you earn, and we're going to require you to tell us, and it gets a lot more fierce. And so out of the blue, like literally, I think it was on Saturday morning, the White House sent this note out, and it was just like, bam, you do that, and there's sanctions coming your way, right? There are tariffs coming your way, right? I read it, I was just like, oh, blimey, that they really mean it, right? Did that make headlines over in the UK?
It didn't really. It didn't cut through here at all. But I read the same thing. And so the only thing I would say is there's a step in it which says you can't unfairly punish American companies. And this is going to be, I think, the kind of dancing on the head of the pin trick, which is we're not unfairly punishing American companies. It just so happens that 7 of the top 10 digital companies in the world are American. If they were Chinese, we'd be charging them the same taxes.
Oh, 100%. And then it said all that nice stuff, and then it suddenly used the word extortion. But before that, it was quite pleasant.
Yeah. We've talked
sense
before,
of national protection.
There is definitely that, and so this is the tension that I think is obvious at the moment in the UK. I mean, Keir Starmer's over in Washington at the moment, right? The UK.
He's there today, right?
Yeah, he did. One of the things that they announced yesterday was an AI partnership with the US, a high-tech partnership that they want to basically give access, to be an AI partner with the US. So you can kind of see there's like this. We're trying to say, well, on the one hand, we want to be part of this club, and we want to get the investment that comes with it. And one of the quirks of copyright, by the way, is that it only applies where the breach happens. So if you train a model in the UK, you have to train it using UK copyright law. If you operate an AI, LLM search, whatever, in the UK, it has to kind of abide by copyright law. But if you obviously, if you crawl from, San Fernando, whatever, and you crawl UK data and you build a model in the US, the breach occurs in the US, it sits under US copyright law. So that's what's happening at the moment, is this kind of slightly, as you say, geopolitical. We're going to align ourselves with America. The EU is going to tend to be more regulated around safety. China is going to do what China does, which is, apply massive resources and have many fewer kind of rules and regulations applied to it. And so it's a bit of an arms race. And that's where the creative industries is trying to make a very loud noise to say, well, hang on a minute. If the price of kind of aligning ourselves with American technology is that we effectively give up one of our most valuable industries, that seems to be too high a price to pay. There must be a better way of doing that. And round 2 of the consultation will be fascinating to see what the government kind of takes from it.
And you thought it was an iPhone or a search engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? It's funny. I give a lot of thought to this about the fact that, these tech companies started off and they were in a largely unregulated era. And so, for 25, 30 years, it's a free run to grow and grow and grow because the world needed another kind of exponential growth in technology. It had to happen. But certain laws were passed to give relatively free passage to those businesses to be able to achieve that. And the two that this always comes back to in any kind of discussion like this is it comes back to copyright. But America has a different version of copyright, which they call fair use, the doctrine of fair use. And we should talk a bit about that. But then there's also a second law called Section 2, any technology platform of responsibility for the stuff that it publishes. And so let me, I think it might just be helpful really quickly to explain that. And if you want to jump in, please do. But let's talk about fair use first. So basically the rule of copyright, as you've described, goes all the way back to Queen Anne back in the 1700s. And the simple rule is if you make it, you can decide how you make money from it. That's a really shorthand, idiot version of what's a very complicated piece of law. But fair use says something different. America passes this change to copyright law that is only appropriate in America or only relevant in America. And it says you can use copyrighted works as long as you create something novel and different, and that grows the market as a whole. Yeah. And so if you think it's a bit like, back in the day when you used to sample music, right? I'm going to pinch that tiny bit from Soul to Soul and put it in this song over here, and it's going to make this song better, and the music industry wins, and everybody's happy. And Soul to Soul might or might not get paid, but I'm kind of allowed to do it, and it's kind of okay. But sampling then became search. Somehow it went from there to there because everybody we talked about it earlier on. So everybody was happy to give all their content to search because search gave you traffic back, which you could sell. And so there was a transaction taking place. Yeah. It's a bit like giving your newspapers to a large news agent chain because they sell your newspaper and you're happy with that. No problem at all. They're not stealing my paper. They're actually selling my paper and I'm getting paid for it. That's a winner.
Yeah.
It's a problem when you don't get paid, right? So fair use left a gaping hole in the world of AI because everybody just said, I'm going to suck up all of the content in the world and I'm going to create something novel with Gen AI. And then I'm completely absolved of any responsibility. I don't even need to tell anyone about it. And I'm going to use it under fair use and I'll be fine because I'm creating new markets with AI. Gray area again. Where did that happen? Did it happen in America? Did it happen in the cloud? Where was the cloud? It's almost impossible to take it back to source to figure out where it was. And we're in another one of those miraculous gray areas that tech either is incredibly lucky to keep falling into, or it designs them.
Yeah,
I suspect it's the latter. So that's kind of fair use.
Just on that. So we've started to see. Please. So one of the things it's quite interesting. So we obviously, most of the trade bodies will talk to each other about these kind of consultations, right? So one of the things we were really interested in was a lot of the American trade bodies were really upset that in this consultation, the UK government had kind of said, hey, look, this isn't like, the copyright conditions in the US are very different. Fair use allows a whole bunch of this stuff to happen. And we got a big pushback from the American trade bodies to say, no, it absolutely doesn't. Like this is an abuse of fair use in the US exactly the same way as it's an abuse of copyright. And so we've seen, I think last week before, Thomson Reuters won kind of a case in the US, which was to say, there was an AI company that was effectively taking journals.
I'm talking to the lawyer next week.
Right. So it's from their legal kind of business, taking excerpts and making them into an AI product and selling them on. And their defense was, hey, it's fair use. It's not a problem. And the judge ruled pretty convincingly that the fair use, the definition of fair use was you weren't going to just replicate it for commercial gain. And so it failed on all the tests.
It's called substitution, right? Well, I've changed this thing to this thing and then resold it as mine. It's the same thing. I'm selling the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not a Gucci. I remember it's like when you go and buy those jeans at the market at Stratfield. Yeah. It's like, Ralph Lauren jeans. Yeah. They're not the same. Yeah.
My favorite is the Nolex. I love a Nolex.
The Nolex. Hugo Bass. I've got a great Hugo Bass jacket actually back at the house.
Yeah. we're starting to see. So you're starting to see kind of case law in the US around fair use. That's going to be tested in the same way, which is why, as you say, more than ever, right? The last 5 years, each of these cases. So if you remember the ACCC report was kind of the canary in the coal mine for a lot of the regulators took that and built on top of it. This is a kind of piece of digital regulation law. And I think the UK copyright consultation is probably the same thing here, which it will feed into what happens around fair use cases in the US. It will be referenced and kind of used by the EU as they keep trying to find the right answer there. So hopefully there'll be some kind of consensus. But yeah, you're right. There's that. So Section 230, you were gonna do.
Well, Section 230, for anybody that doesn't know, it was a regulation passed in the 60s. Basically, the logic was that when technology suddenly was going to emerge and become this, platform, it wasn't a publisher in the same way as if you pick. So it's to protect platforms from being prosecuted for contempt or libel or defamation or basically anything that its users do on the platform. And the logic, as told back in the day when the law was passed, was that if somebody picks up the phone and makes a death threat to somebody on the other side of the country, okay, the telephone person, British Telecom, isn't responsible for that being communicated. Now, in publishing, if you publish it, whether you wrote it or somebody else wrote it or somebody wrote a letter in, you're responsible because you published it to the masses. You're the vessel by which the offence was committed. Okay, so you're liable. I know I've been sued like dozens of times. I'm sure you have as well. No offence, but it's just part of the job, right?
Yeah.
And no offence. But with Section 230, it was then taken on board by the platforms. So Meta said, if someone decides to organise an ISIS terror attack on Facebook, even if we know about it, we're not liable for anything that then happens. And this did happen. Yeah. So, the San Bernardino, terror attack, the family sued because Meta knew that the terrorists were organizing the attack. They even knew the time and date of the attack in Meta, and they did nothing. And it went to court and it was dismissed on the second day because of Section 230. And so this has happened again and again and again. So again, this is another American law that kind of puts a ring of steel of protection around its ability to kind of ride roughshod through effectively 300 or 400 years of conventional law elsewhere in the world. And I think we're just starting to get a front row seat to what that is and what the implications of that is.
Well, I think I did the maths the other day, right? So have you heard the reference to the Magnificent Seven stocks?
Yes.
Right, which is
more than aware.
I always miss one of them, but it's Meta, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla, and
the other one.
And these are these are kind of all of what you traditionally think of as the big technology stocks. That the value of those stocks is 35% of the American equivalent of the FTSE, so the S&P 500. 35%.
Yep.
So effectively, a third of all kind of US, I'm exaggerating slightly, but a third of all US pension funds. It's a third of the stock market, which kind of dictates the investment success and all the rest of it. So it is hugely, hugely tied to the success of the US economy. In a way that probably is underestimated. So when we think about one of the things that Starmer and Trump talked about yesterday was a trade deal. Now, in that trade deal, traditionally you think of trade deals as like, are we going to have chickens and, we're going to always chickens with chlorine in them and all the rest of it. Are we going to do deals around kind of access to farming and food and whatever? If a third of your effectively a third of your kind of stock market value is in tech stocks, that's going to be in this deal. JD Vance has made it very clear that they want to push back on censorship. They want to push back on regulatory burdens put on American companies. This is going to be something that becomes an issue. Effectively, the question will be, can a US administration effectively force the UK into accepting the rules of the road of the American internet in return for a trade deal that kind of helps them become an AI superpower? And that is That's a conversation that I think we need to kind of try and make clear, make a little more understandable.
Let's talk about three things here. Like, the first thing is, right, the internet is not fucking America's. All right, if it was, we'd still have America Online. Right, it isn't. It's the World Wide Web, and the first word is world. Right. So this is a global thing, not an American thing. They do not own the bloody internet, and I know they think they do. Okay, but then America also thinks it owns tons of countries that it doesn't. And so let's just be fair. Okay, the internet is the World Wide Web. Right. And by the way, you mentioned it in the call that we had last week. I'll say it again. I totally agree. Right. There's going to be a splinter net. And if America wants to have its shitty Walmart obese web over there, happy days, go play. But the rest of the world's going to have a proper internet full of true stuff that's going to be really interesting. Right. And it also give you ideas how to eat healthily. So I want to live in that internet. I'll pay for that internet over there. I'll pay for the good internet. That'll be just fine. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, and there's journalists on this call, I can see them, right? So here's something that you don't know that you ought to know. If you go and get your last free trade agreement with America, okay, and the one before, because they renewed them all about 7 years ago, if you go back to the last two, you'll find that there's a really odd and, funnily enough, extremely grey comment about 800 pages in that says something like, when you sign this, you will also agree that you won't do anything, here comes the grey bit, unfair to limit American companies' abilities to thrive in your economy. I wonder what that means.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, this is like we're not going to say 230 because that's clearly going to be a trigger. And we're not going to say fair use because that's going to be a trigger, right? So what we'll say don't do anything unfair. And guess what? We got another grey. And did they all get signed? Of course they all got signed. And so we've now got these free trade agreements that if it keeps going down and down and down and down through the various sediments to get to the base rock of what this is all about, it's about two things, all right? It's about, number one, America's spent too much money, okay? And its debt is 100% of its GDP, all right? So that's a problem. If this is my house, I now spend exactly what I earn, okay? And that means I can't grow while my neighbor down the road called Jeff China, he's buying a new car and building an outhouse, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. I'm not happy about that. I'm not keeping up with the Joneses, right? I'm unhappy about that. America wants to solve that problem, and it's even more irritating when all of the companies that are driving all that global innovation and all that global wealth are American, but they're not getting the benefits. So they want to change the tax laws, which comes back to something else that I learned this week. So I've had a really good week, actually. I'm exhausted. I've been running around like a blue-ass fly all week. I've been speaking on stage. I've been answering questions. It's been madhouse, right? But I did have time to sit down and read in detail Google's Q4 2024 financial statements. And I'm so excited I got this right. So I know there's journalists on the line again, so I'm going to say it to them, right? Hidden in that document, which I'm happy to give you, okay, is a statement that says that in the last 90 days, Google, for the first time ever in its history, earned more money outside America than in it. And so that doesn't feel like a big deal. It's like for 51 cents, 49 cents. But that now means that every single one of the Magnificent Seven earn more money outside America than in it. Now that feels like the kind of trigger that someone in the White House that's trying to curry favor with the new administration might go and cause a song and dance about. It's exactly the kind of thing that I would imagine that your mate JD Vance might go jogging up the corridor to the Oval Office to go, hey, seen this? And I suspect that, that kind of jingoistic knee-jerk reaction with the you're extorting our companies thing, I just wonder if these two things are directly correlated. And you did not see that statement of that 49 to 51 thing reported in any press. It was nowhere because everybody was wowing over, oh my goodness, look at Gemini's new tool at this and the jazz hands on this, right? We as journalists, we've got to zero in, exacting in on these people now more than ever because, oh my God, there's so much grey and it's a cloud and we just have to clear it and get. I wore a grey t-shirt. That was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. It makes me as bad as them.
Thank you, by
Anyway,
the way, Andrew Sims. Thank you very much, Andrew, for what you've put in the chat there. You're absolutely right. You're starting to see this happen all over the world. Australia actually is again an interesting market. It's where a lot of this stuff gets sort of tested, and the Australian government is fairly. I mean, you know this better than I do, Ricky, but it's fairly interested in this area, should we say?
yeah, so Australia's been very brave because it wanted to go first. We had a political party at the time that really wanted to make a stand and wanted to, step up. And there was a whole load of reasons for that. Too long to go into, but they gave it a really good go. But then ultimately, we never actually enacted the law. We just threatened it, and a whole load of publishers got paid some money. But then, in the first opportunity not to pay that money, which was Meta stopped paying, and it's actually the anniversary of them not paying tomorrow. Actually, I just posted about it today, and so that's interesting. But the next country to really put the hammer down was Canada, right? So Canada went next, and I've been spent literally my flights are between here and Canada all the time, working on this. The interesting thing is that when I don't know if you saw the stuff, but Donald Trump. Started kind of deriding and laughing at Justin Trudeau and calling him the governor of America's 51st state.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because just after that, Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic. He didn't realize his mic was still on, and he was talking to people outside an event he was at, and he was basically saying, "I've just come off the phone from the White House," and he's deadly serious. He's not joking. He's coming after us, and trade tariffs and all kinds of stuff. And then Meta had banned all newspaper coverage on its sites in Canada. And so as a result, the federal government in Canada had a moratorium on spending any ad money at all on Google and said, we're not going to spend money on Google. And about 2 hours after that phone conversation, the government removed the moratorium and spent $100 million on Meta. Yeah. So these things are having real world. That's $100 million not going to publishers now, right?
Yeah.
So these threats are having real world on the ground implications that flow down the pipe. Now, where we go, we as an industry, I think the only way to defend against this is that, as you've said to me many times, and I totally agree with you from our careers, is that sunlight's the best disinfectant here. We just have to keep revealing this stuff. And, I do worry, and I do impeach entreat the professional media to work harder at actually exposing this stuff, because this isn't a tech company you're reporting on now, it's geopolitics. Okay. Yeah. It's the hip pockets of every single person in your country. And I think we need to recognize that, you think that you work as a specialist in politics. Okay. Your person working in tech right now is every bit as important as that guy working in politics in Downing Street.
And as we keep saying, that this is legacy tech. These are not innovative entrants to the market. They're 20-year-old companies run by 50-year-old men.
Like us.
Like us, who are basically deploying billions in capital to create an advantage in monopoly markets, right? This is big business, and it should be sort of reported on in very simple, plain English. And we can do a job there, but listen, we'll wait for the consultation to come back. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We'll look and see what the kind of AI deal is that looks like it's kind of shaping between the UK and the US. That'll be interesting. And we'll keep we'll keep watching as different little legal cases like the one that's in the chat, kind of pop up all over the world. And every time they do, there's a little bit more precedent. There's a little bit more discovery. There's a little bit more kind of a move towards a framework that hopefully is going to end up with what we all want, which is basically successful, sustainable publishers producing brilliant content that can be used in AI tools and continually make them better. But that ecosystem to be kind of healthy and workable for the future. I'm always optimistic we'll get there, but we've got some hard yards coming, I think, the next year or so.
Amazing. I've got one last question for you. What's your prediction is going to come out of this consultation?
Always with government consultation, my prediction is fudge. I think the reaction was
more grey, right?
So what I think it sort of leans towards is there's going to have to be a bit more discovery, because what it's leaning towards is a kind of carve out for the creative industries, some form of way that sort of is managed. I think there's going to have to be they're going to have to get into the operational impact of it. But I think the broad exception, no kind of regulation is dead in the water. I actually think that it would be incredibly difficult now for the government to come back and stick with their recommendation, because the pushback has been so consistent and so strong, that I wouldn't say that one's dead, but I think it would be very difficult for that not to be watered down massively. And so in the end, I think we'll end up with a kind of option 1 plus, and then see if that can actually turn into kind of operational reality.
Let me shorthand that. So what you're saying is that we're about to find out whether Britain is a servant to America or a partner of America, or is willing to upset America, because it can't do both. America is going to insist that it gets everything it wants. And if it doesn't, and if to achieve that, you have to upset your creative community. You can't do both.
Yeah. Well, so actually what's going to be interesting is, if you think of a lot of the people involved in this consultation are US owned, right, and operating in the UK, or UK owned and operating in the US. So what we really need now is for the US publishers, US music industry, US creative industry to say, hang on a minute, this isn't what the US wants. This is what US AI developers want. And so that's what we'll probably see now, is the kind of conversation while this goes into consultation. This will slightly move on to the exploration of fair use. And so we need America's kind of publishers to stand up a bit and go, well, hang on a minute, you're going to kill the Journal, the Post. There's a reason that Perplexity and News Corp are in court, right? Because the same question is being asked in the US. You've got the same problem. So that's hopefully what we'll see coming through. Thank you for all the love, whoever did that. That was wonderful.
It's the person that joined with 30 seconds to go. So look, let's take that to another chat. Look, this has been amazing. Thank you. Look, Rule Britannia, right? That's all I've got to say.
Yeah.
Let's go hard. Well done, Queen Anne. Excellent job.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can maintain that. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. You know that what we'll do is that we will record this or break this down, download this, and post it on the Future Media Substack, so you can find it to come back and review and listen to whenever you want. We'll be back again next Friday, unless you're going to tell me something I don't know.
No,
you all right, Chris? All right, great. I've no idea what whiskey I'll have then, but I'll bring another one.
I think next week we should set the ethical question: can you drink non-alcoholic whiskey for breakfast?
Well, I've just drunk about half a bottle of it. It's not great. I think I might. I'll mail it to you. Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.
See you later. Bye bye.
Be good. See you now. Bye.